In the long, bloody history of the Roman Republic, one defeat is remembered above all others. Cannae, a day of perfect, terrible annihilation at the hands of Hannibal. But 111 years later, in 105 BC, Rome would suffer a disaster even greater, a catastrophe so complete, so staggering in its scale, that it would dwarf even Cannae's legendary losses. It was a day that would be burned into the Roman calendar as a dies Ater, a black day. This was the Battle of Arausio. It was not a battle lost to a foreign genius like Hannibal. It was a battle lost to something far more insidious: Rome's own internal sickness. It was a day when the bickering and arrogance of two men led to the deaths of over 100,000 Romans and left the Republic itself completely defenseless. This is the story of Rome's most catastrophic military failure, a defeat born from political poison, class warfare, and the fatal pride of one man. It is the story of the disaster that exposed the rot in the Republic, shattered its armies, and, in doing so, paved the way for the rise of the very man who would save Rome, and ultimately doom the Republic: Gaius Marius. The story begins not with an army, but with a people. In the late 2nd century BC, a massive migration of tribes, primarily the Cimbri and the Teutones, began to move south from their ancestral lands in what is now Denmark, likely driven by floods or overpopulation. This was not a typical raiding party. It was an entire nation on the move. Hundreds of thousands of men, women, and children, their possessions piled high in great wagon forts, searching for new lands to settle. They were a demographic wave threatening to swamp the known world. In 113 BC, they first clashed with a Roman army at Neria and destroyed it. In 109 BC, they defeated another. In 107 BC, at the Battle of Bertigala, their allies the Tigerini ambushed and killed a Roman consul, Lucius Cassius Longinus, and forced the survivors to pass under the yoke, the ultimate symbol of Roman humiliation. In Rome, these successive defeats created a wave of terror not seen since the days of Hannibal. This was the Cimbrian terror. The barbarians were not just raiders, they were an unstoppable force, and they were getting closer to Italy. The Republic, now genuinely frightened, responded by amassing the largest concentration of military power it had in decades. The problem was not the army, but the men who would lead it. In 105 BC, Rome dispatched 2 consular armies to Gaul to find and destroy the Cimbri once and for all. The first army was led by the proconsul, Quintus Servilius Caepio. Caepio was the living embodiment of the old Roman aristocracy, a nobilis. He was fabulously wealthy, arrogant, and a hero to the conservative Senate faction. The optimates he saw high command not as a duty, but as a birthright, a path to glory, and even more wealth. The second and larger army was led by the sitting consul, Gnaeus Mallius Maximus. Maximus was the exact opposite. He was a novus homo, a new man, the first in his family to achieve high office. He was seen by the old nobility as an upstart, a commoner who had no right to be there, an incompetent, plotting oaf who had risen above his station. By Roman law, the serving consul, Maximus, was the senior commander. The proconsul, Caepio, was legally and constitutionally required to obey his orders. But Caepio, blinded by class-based snobbery, was utterly disgusted by the idea of serving under a new man. He despised Maximus more than he feared the enemy. The 2 Roman armies, numbering in total some 80,000 legionaries and 40,000 auxiliaries and camp followers, arrived at the Rhône River near the town of Arausio, the modern-day city of Orange in France. The Cimbri, led by their king, Boiarix, were camped on the far side. This was the moment for a unified strategy. Instead, Caepio flatly refused to join his camp with Maximus's. He pitched his own, separate camp on the western bank of the river, while Maximus held the eastern bank. Worse, he positioned his camp between Maximus and the Cimbri, a position of supreme arrogance. He refused to attend war councils. He refused to coordinate a plan. He sent insulting messages to his superior officer. The Roman military might, divided by the arrogance of one man, was now 2 separate, vulnerable armies, physically incapable of supporting each other. The Cimbri king, Boiarix, was stunned by the Roman disunity. Seeing the two bickering camps, he even sent envoys to Maximus's camp to negotiate for land, a last attempt at a peaceful settlement. When Caepio heard that Maximus might be negotiating, he flew into a rage. He was terrified that this new man might actually succeed, make peace, and steal all the glory driven by jealousy in a fatal underestimation of his enemy. Caepio made his move. On October 6, 105 BC, he ordered his own army to attack the Cimbri camp, without any support from Maximus. It was a rash, unilateral, and suicidal charge. The Cimbri, who had been tested in battle for years, were not the disorganized rabble Caepio expected. They met his attack with savage, disciplined ferocity. Caepio's army, caught in an ill-conceived frontal assault, was completely overwhelmed and annihilated. The Cimbri overran his camp, capturing his vast personal baggage train, which included a notorious hoard of gold, the gold of Tolosa, which Caepio had allegedly stolen from a sacred temple. The gold vanished, and the legend of a curse on Caepio and his descendants was born. Caepio himself, disgracefully, was one of the few to escape the slaughter. From across the river, Gnaeus Mallius Maximus and his legions had just witnessed the complete destruction of the other Roman army. The terror and despair that must have swept their ranks is unimaginable. As Caepio's broken soldiers fled, they streamed back towards Maximus's camp, pursued by the entire Cimbri host, spreading their panic and shattering the morale of the Second Army before the battle had even begun. The victorious and battle-hardened Cimbri then turned their full, undivided attention on Maximus's camp. The Second Roman Army, pinned against the deep, fast-flowing Rhone River, with no escape route, had no chance. The Cimbri attack was a formality. The army was massacred. Ancient sources say that of the 120,000 Romans present, fewer than a dozen men, including the two commanders, survived. The Battle of Arausio was, by the numbers, the single worst military defeat in Roman history. The casualty figures dwarfed even those of Cannae. The news threw Rome into a state of blind panic. The Cimbrian terror was no longer a distant threat, it was a reality. The road to Italy was now completely undefended. In this moment of supreme crisis, the Roman people realized their aristocratic leadership had failed them. The disaster was not the fault of the soldiers, but of the arrogant, incompetent general who had led them. The public backlash was immediate. Caepio was tried, his property confiscated, and he was exiled in utter disgrace. The people of Rome, in their terror, cast aside their sacred laws and traditions. They looked past the failed nobility and turned to the one man they believed could save them. He was another novus homo, a rugged, uncompromising soldier already famous for his victories in Africa. They elected him consul in absentia, an illegal act, and then, desperate for a savior, they elected him consul again and again and again. 5 years in a row, a complete shattering of the Republican Constitution. His name was Gaius Marius. Arausio was more than a battle. It was the death knell of the old Roman Republic. It was the disaster that proved the old military system, reliant on land-owning citizen soldiers and arrogant, politically appointed generals, was broken. It gave Marius the undeniable political mandate to enact his revolutionary military reforms, to abolish the property requirement for service, to create a professional, standing army loyal not to the Senate, but to their general. It was this new army that would save Rome from the Cimbri, and one day, it would be this same army that men like Caesar would march on Rome itself. Arausio was the defeat that, in saving the Republic, ensured it would one day fall.